Mark shifted his car into park and turned off the engine, exhaling slowly as the garage door clanked shut behind him. The sun was just beginning to dip beyond the tree line, casting long shadows across the quiet suburban street. He hadn't told anyone he was coming home early, not even his son, who was off at Camp Pine Ridge until Saturday. After 4 days in Dallas, all Mark wanted was to sit on the couch, microwave some leftovers, and soak in the silence of an empty house. But silence wasn't what greeted him. The moment he stepped into the front hallway, a faint, unfamiliar scent curled around his senses, something floral and artificial, like cheap air freshener. That was strange. Mark was meticulous about what entered his house. He hated synthetic smells. His son, Kyle, had mild asthma, and anything strong or unnatural was strictly banned. He froze. The coat rack had moved. It wasn't much, just a few inches to the left. But Mark's eyes were trained for detail. His job as a home appraiser had made him hypersensitive to spatial alignment. The umbrella stand, too. Off-center. Not something Kyle would ever touch. Mark shut the door behind him slowly and locked it. His hand hovered near the light switch, but he decided against it. Better to listen first. The house should have been silent, but faint thumps echoed from upstairs. Movement, not random creaking, not a pet, deliberate footsteps. Then a dragging sound. Something heavy being pulled across the floor. Mark's heart began to thud harder. He reached for the nearest object, a decorative fire poker by the fireplace, and crept slowly up the stairs. His breath shallow, footsteps light, he kept to the edge of each step to avoid squeaking. As he approached the landing, the noises became clearer. There was humming now. A woman's voice. Cheerful. Familiar. He moved closer to Kyle's bedroom, the only one with a door slightly ajar. The hallway was dim, but he could see shadows shifting under the door, dancing with each movement inside. Another drag, another thump, then a child's giggle. Mark's pulse quickened. What the hell is going on? He reached out and pushed the door opened just enough to peer inside, and what he saw stopped him cold. Kyle's posters had been taken down. His gaming setup was unplugged and stacked in the corner. A pile of neatly folded clothing, not Kyle's, sat atop the dresser. There were plastic storage bins labeled Clara's school supplies, toys, and winter clothes. A colorful toddler's mattress leaned against the far wall, and standing in the middle of the chaos, humming to herself as she unpacked a cardboard box, was Karen Lively, the president of the HOA. Mark burst into the room. "What the... Karen? What are you doing in my house?" She turned slowly, blinking as if he'd just interrupted her mid-yoga class. "Oh, Mark, you're home early." Her tone was cheerful, almost annoyed, like he was the inconvenience. He stepped farther in, gripping the fire poker tightly. "Why are you in my son's room?" Karen gave a light chuckle, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's just temporary. Your house was sitting empty, and Clara needed a place to stay while the mold guys finish our bathroom reno. I figured, well, since Kyle's away, it'd be the perfect solution. No harm done." Mark stared at her, his jaw slack. She'd let herself in. She'd brought her kid. She was turning his home, his son's sanctuary, into a storage unit. And she said it like she was doing him a favor. Mark's grip on the fire poker tightened. He wasn't sure whether to shout or laugh. This had to be some kind of twisted prank. "You figured it'd be the perfect solution?" He echoed, his voice low and disbelieving. "Karen, you broke into my house." Karen didn't flinch. She simply turned back to the bin she'd been organizing, placing a small pink hoodie neatly on top of a stack of books. "Oh, come on, Mark. Let's not be dramatic. I didn't break in. I used the HOA access key. It's protocol in case of emergencies." His eyes narrowed. "What emergency justifies moving your kid's entire bedroom into my son's room?" Karen stood upright and turned to face him fully, arms crossed with a kind of bureaucratic smugness. Your house was dark for days. No car, no lights, no activity. I checked the guest access logs. You didn't file a notice of absence, so I assumed it was safe to proceed. You assumed? Mark's voice rose. You assumed it was okay to trespass and treat my house like it was up for lease? Karen tilted her head. It's not trespassing. Technically, the HOA can authorize temporary emergency reallocation of property in certain circumstances. It's in the Charter, Section 8, Article C. Her tone was as if she were giving a TED Talk on neighborhood unity. Mark couldn't believe what he was hearing. That's not a real rule. It is, she said smoothly. You probably just never read the bylaws. You made that up. Karen's jaw tensed, but she quickly recovered with another chipper smile. Look, my daughter Clara needed a place to stay while the contractors fix our place. They said the work would take 2 days, Max. This room was just sitting here. I brought her stuff over so she'd feel at home. No big deal. Mark stepped forward. This is my home. You don't get to decide how it's used. Karen shrugged. But you weren't using it. That's when Mark noticed something that sent another jolt down his spine. The wall behind her, once decorated with Kyle's soccer medals, now held a set of watercolor paintings, childish, pastel drawings of flowers and smiley faces, taped. Neatly along the edge of the window, Kyle's things had been packed away, replaced, erased. He stepped toward the closet, yanked it open. It was half full of Karen's belongings, diapers, canned food, a white noise machine. You were going to move in, he said quietly. Karen's expression soured just for a moment. Don't be ridiculous. I'm just borrowing the space. You should be flattered, really. It means your home is one of the safest, most well-maintained in the community. Mark had heard enough. He pulled out his phone. You need to leave. Now. Karen's eyes darkened. Are you threatening me? What? If you film me without consent and try to intimidate a single mother? She raised her voice dramatically. I will call the police. Mark laughed in disbelief. You broke into my house. And if you keep escalating, she said, pulling her own phone from her purse, I will report you for harassment. He stared at her. Was this real? Then she did the unthinkable. She walked out of the room down the hallway and locked his son's door from the outside behind her. Mark lunged, but she was faster. She held up her phone as she descended the stairs, her thumb tapping rapidly. This is for my safety, Mark. You're clearly unstable. And then he heard it. 9911. What's your emergency? Mark stood frozen at the top of the stairs, his son's room now locked behind him, his own home weaponized against him. Down below, Karen paced in the entryway, phone pressed to her ear as she put on a dramatic show. Yes, officer, I'm at 241 Hillside Way. There's a man here acting very aggressively. Yes, I feel threatened. He's yelling. He's got a weapon. Please hurry. Mark's hand clenched around the phone, still in his grip. A weapon? She meant the fireplace poker. He'd long since set it down, but she was spinning it into a threat. It wasn't just manipulative, it was calculated. She turned, locking eyes with him as she continued her performance. I'm just trying to keep my daughter safe. He broke in while I was organizing her space. Her space? Mark took a breath, forcing himself to stay calm. He needed to document this. He opened his camera app and hit record, capturing Karen in mid-fabrication. This man, I think his name is Mark, he just barged in. He wasn't supposed to be here until the weekend. I was given temporary occupancy by the HOA board while my house is being remediated. She ended the call before he could get closer. Her face shifted instantly from panic to smug self-assurance. They're on their way. You might want to put that thing down before they arrive. Mark gestured at his phone. I've got everything I need, including your little act. Karen's eyes flicked to the camera, and for the first time, her smile faltered. I don't know what kind of world you think we live in, he said, voice low but firm. But you can't just walk into someone's house and take over a bedroom because it's empty for a few days. Karen straightened her posture and dusted off her floral cardigan like she was preparing for a courtroom. You're wrong. There is a clause that allows for emergency accommodations under community hardship. My house is under environmental hazard remediation. You didn't post an absence notice. You forfeited certain occupancy rights under HOA. Emergency policy. That's made-up legal gibberish. It's binding, she said firmly. It was ratified last quarter. You missed the vote. I missed the vote because I was at the hospital with my son. He had pneumonia. Karen blinked, feigning concern. Oh, I didn't realize. No, you didn't. Because you don't care. A flicker of something real crossed her face. Annoyance? Guilt? He couldn't tell, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. She turned toward the door just as two police cruisers pulled up outside. Flashing lights spilled through the frosted glass windows. Karen rushed to the door like a victim being rescued. Mark followed, keeping the camera steady. The officers stepped in, hands cautiously resting on their belts. She's trespassing, Mark said before anyone could speak. Please, Karen cut in. I'm just trying to keep my daughter safe. He came in screaming, waving this iron rod around, accusing me of... The senior officer raised a hand. Let's slow down, one at a time. Mark showed them the video, then pointed to the lock on Kyle's bedroom door. She used a master key, an HOA key. She entered my house without permission, replaced my son's belongings, and locked me out of my own room. Karen's face paled, slightly. I had community authority. You had nothing, Mark snapped. And I can prove it. He reached into the drawer near the kitchen entry and pulled out a small USB stick. This house has interior nanny cams, motion-triggered. The officer raised a brow. You have footage of her entering? Oh, I've got more than that, Mark said. Karen took a step back, her expression finally cracking. The officer nodded. We'll need to see it. Right now. Karen's confidence drained from her face as the officer gestured toward the living room. Let's have a seat, ma'am. And Mark, let's take a look at that footage. Mark nodded and walked to his laptop on the kitchen counter, sliding the USB into the port. His hands shook slightly, not from fear but fury barely restrained. Karen had gone beyond entitled. She had crossed into dangerous delusion. And now, she was about to be exposed. The video loaded with a soft chime. The officers leaned in as Mark clicked the date-stamped clip. The living room camera came to life. A timestamp in the corner showed 10:16 a.m. 2 days ago, the day Mark had left for Dallas. Karen appeared on screen, casually letting herself in with a key. She wasn't alone. She held a phone to her ear. Yeah, he left this morning. Suitcase, briefcase, the whole deal. I watched him drive off. I'll have everything in and set up before Clara gets out of school. Then she paused in the middle of the room, looked around and said with a smirk, It's like he never uses this place anyway. The officer paused the video. Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I assume that's not your home, the senior officer said slowly. Karen straightened up in her seat, her voice now tight, defensive. I had reason to believe the property was inactive and eligible for temporary repurposing. The HOA doesn't override criminal trespass laws, the other officer cut in. This is someone's private residence, and you entered without consent. That's breaking and entering regardless of your intentions. But I didn't break anything, she snapped. I used the HOA key. And this house, this room, wasn't even in use. Mark stepped in. And then she locked me out of it. My son's room. The officers exchanged glances. Show us. Karen stayed rooted to the couch as they followed Mark up the stairs. The hallway light flicked on as he led them to Kyle's door. A new child-proof latch had been installed, a plastic sliding mechanism mounted to the top corner. She installed this today, Mark said. While I was downstairs, to keep me from accessing my own son's room. One officer examined the latch. It was recently screwed in. You got a screwdriver handy? Mark retrieved one from the hallway closet. The officers removed the child lock and slowly opened the door. Inside, the room was a bizarre blend of two lives. On one side, Kyle's bookshelf and game console, half-packed and pushed aside. On the other, a small pink cot, toys, and even a framed photo of a little girl Mark had never seen. The bins and boxes were neatly stacked, too neatly. This wasn't a temporary setup. This had been planned. She meant to stay for a while, one officer muttered. Maybe longer. Mark's stomach turned as he imagined Kyle returning home to find his room transformed, his life replaced by someone else's. The officers called Karen upstairs. She came slowly, knowing the tone had shifted. One of them asked, "How long were you planning to keep your daughter here?" Karen stiffened. "Until the mold remediation was done. They said 2 days, maybe 3, 4 max. Then why'd you bring weeks' worth of supplies?" Silence. The officer pulled out his notepad. "Ma'am, I'm issuing a formal trespass. Warning, you are not to return to this residence for any reason. Violation will result in arrest." Karen's face burned red. "You don't understand the kind of stress I'm under. My home is unsafe. My child needs a stable environment." "You should have tried talking to your neighbor," the officer said, gesturing to Mark. "Not secretly moving in." Karen turned away without another word, clutching her purse like a lifeline as she headed down the stairs. But Mark knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. 2 days passed without incident. Mark tried to return to normal, putting Kyle's things back in place, scrubbing the floral air freshener scent from the walls, and deep cleaning the carpet where Karen's daughter had spilled juice on the floor. But a cold tension hung in the air, lingering like a storm just over the horizon. On Saturday morning, Mark picked Kyle up from camp. The boy was tired but happy, rattling off stories about archery and canoe races. As they pulled into the driveway, Kyle blinked at the house and frowned. "Hey, where's my soccer flag? The one in my window?" Mark's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Karen took it down while she was borrowing your room." Kyle stared at him, confused. "Why would she be in my room?" Mark hesitated, unsure how much to say. "It's complicated. But don't worry, everything's back to normal." That night, Mark watched Kyle sleep, his face peaceful in the glow of the nightlight. But Mark didn't sleep. His instincts screamed that this wasn't over. He was right. On Monday morning, the letter arrived, an official envelope from the Hillside Pines HOA. Mark opened it, scanned the contents, and immediately felt his jaw clench. Notice: a violation, unauthorized weapon possession, aggressive conduct, and non-compliance with community conduct standards. The letter cited a fabricated incident report, Karen's version of events. According to her complaint, Mark had threatened her with a weapon, screamed profanities, and refused to acknowledge the HOA's authority. She claimed she had entered under Emergency Repurposing Clause H3 and had been verbally abused in front of her daughter. And the kicker? A $1,500 fine. Mark stormed to the HOA office later that day, only to find the board unavailable for unscheduled grievances. But on the bulletin board near the entrance, a new flyer had been pinned. Urgent, community safety concerns due. To a recent altercation, we urge all residents to remain alert and report suspicious behavior. The HOA has received a formal complaint about threatening conduct involving a male resident. No names will be released, but we will not tolerate aggression in our peaceful neighborhood. Mark tore it down. When he returned home, his inbox was full of concerned neighbor messages. One even read, "Heard you snapped on Karen? Hope everything's okay with Kyle." The smear campaign had begun. That evening, as he raked leaves in the front yard, Karen passed by walking her daughter. She didn't say a word, but she didn't need to. Her smirk said it all. Mark approached the mailbox and saw a familiar figure near the HOA community notice board down the street, Karen, tacking up another flyer. He jogged over and ripped it down before she could finish. "Pinning it? Still trying to play victim?" he asked, holding up the flyer. "This ends now." Karen smiled sweetly. "You should know better than to make enemies on the board, Mark, especially when your front lawn is 3 inches above regulation height. You trespassed in my home. You changed my kid's room. You lied to the cops. Prove it in court," she said, eyes gleaming. Mark stared her down. "I will." As she walked away, her daughter skipping beside her, Mark looked down at the crumpled flyer in his hand. But something caught his eye. On the back, scribbled in red crayon, were childish drawings of a house, his house, and stick figures inside. 3 of them. One tall figure was lying down, a red X over its face. Mark's stomach dropped. This wasn't just a neighborhood feud anymore. It was something darker. Mark stared at the crayon drawing in his hands, his pulse thumping in his ears. The stick figure with the red X? It was unmistakable. A crude depiction of him, lying down. Next to it, 2 smaller figures, Karen and her daughter, were smiling. It wasn't just a child's innocent drawing. It was a window into a story Karen had been telling in secret, a story where Mark didn't exist. That night, after putting Kyle to bed, Mark sat down at his laptop, determined to uncover how deep Karen's game went. He pulled up the HOA's digital archives. Thankfully, he'd saved access credentials years ago and dug into every recent change in policy. Section H3, the so-called Emergency Property Repurposing Clause Karen cited, didn't exist until last month. And guess who had submitted the amendment? Karen L. Bennett. Position, Vice President, HOA Board. She'd quietly pushed it through at the last board meeting. Meeting minutes noted unanimous approval, but Mark recognized the names on the roster. 2 were close friends of Karen's. One had sold her his old patio furniture at a steep discount. Karen had stacked the board. He printed everything and clipped it into a folder. If she was going to try and weaponize the HOA, she'd learn the hard way that he wasn't the type to roll over and take it. Just as he set the folder down, his email chimed. Subject, anonymous tipped body. "You're not safe. She's done this. Before. Look into Willowbrook HOA. 2019. Woman named Tina Summers." No signature. No sender name. Mark's breath caught. He searched the case. Willowbrook HOA, 2019, Tina Summers. Only one article came up, buried in the local paper's archives. A vague report. Local HOA dispute results in civil lawsuit. Woman alleges targeted. Harassment, false complaints, and emotional distress after a board member attempted to repurpose her guest house during home renovations. Case settled quietly. No charges filed. The board member's name wasn't listed, but Mark recognized the neighborhood. It was Karen's previous residence. Suddenly, the drawing made sense. The way she acted like his home was hers. The confidence, the manipulation, it wasn't improvised. It was rehearsed. Mark shut his laptop and stared at the door to Kyle's room. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about HOA policy or even temporary shelter. Karen had planned this. The next morning, he dropped Kyle off at school early and returned to find something even more unsettling, a red tricycle in his front yard. It wasn't Kyle's. He turned to his Ring camera feed, and sure enough, the timestamp showed Karen's daughter placing the trike in the yard at 6:17 a.m. Karen watched from the sidewalk, sipping coffee. The message was clear. "We still live here. We're not leaving." Later that day, Mark got a call from his real estate agent. "Hey, just a heads up," the voice on the line said. "Got a call from someone asking if your house was up for rent. Said they saw it posted on a private HOA board. Is that true?" Mark's heart sank. Karen was laying the groundwork for a hostile takeover, gaslighting him, isolating him, rewriting, the narrative so thoroughly that by the time he caught up, he'd be the intruder in his own home. This wasn't over a room. It was about control. Mark hung up and opened his phone's voice recorder. If she wanted a war, she'd get one. And this time, he'd document everything. By the time Thursday rolled around, Mark's house no longer felt like his own. The red tricycle was gone, but now 2 potted plants in pastel ceramic vases had mysteriously appeared on his front porch. The ring cam caught a brief image of Karen's daughter setting them down, while Karen lingered just out of frame, her voice faint but unmistakable. It's important to make a house feel like home. Mark's lawyer hadn't called back yet. Kyle was starting to ask questions. Worse, the principal at Kyle's school requested a meeting, citing concerns raised by a community member about potential instability at home. The board wasn't just helping Karen, they were protecting her. That evening, Mark finally confronted the HOA directly. Armed with a folder of evidence, he stormed into the monthly meeting at the rec center, slapping documents onto the folding table in front of the board. "This," he said, pointing to the clause amendment, "is fraudulent. It wasn't voted on by the community, it was slipped in behind closed doors." Karen, seated smugly in the middle with a faux polite smile, tilted her head. "Everything was filed properly. The minutes were posted in the newsletter. I spoke to 3 homeowners on this street. They never got it." A board member tried to speak, but Mark cut him off. "Karen entered my house without permission. She locked me out of my son's room. She made false police reports. And now she's listing my property as a rental through internal HOA channels? That's criminal." Gasps rippled through the few homeowners in the audience. Karen's smile faltered, just slightly. "You don't have any proof of that," she said quickly. Mark slammed the folder shut. "Try me in court." The board president leaned forward. "Mr. Whitaker, while we understand your frustration, we must remain neutral. This matter is better suited for civil litigation." Neutral. Right. Karen had set the entire narrative. And now they were pretending to play referee. But Mark saw the twitch in her left eye, the first real crack. Later that night, Mark couldn't sleep. He sat on the couch reviewing every video clip, audio snippet, and printed HOA memo he had. There had to be something. Then he noticed something strange. A letterhead. One of the complaint notices from the HOA delivered to his mailbox last week had a different footer than the others. A typo. Hillside Pine Neighborhood Association instead of Hillside Pines Homeowners Association. He blinked. That version didn't exist. He cross-referenced the logo with the official HOA website. They didn't match. The watermark on the paper was slightly off, too. It was fake. Karen was generating her own notices to make her claims look official, and he had proof. Mark printed every version of every letter, highlighting the differences. It was late, just past 1:30 a.m., when he heard a soft click outside, then the squeak of his side gate. He froze. Footsteps moved toward the back of the house. He grabbed his phone and opened the live camera feed. The backyard view blinked on. Karen in. A black hoodie holding a crowbar. She approached the back door and knelt. Picking at the lock, Mark's heart pounded as he dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? She's here. The woman who broke into my house last week. She's trying again. She's in my backyard right now. Stay on the line. Officers are en route. Mark turned off all the lights, crouched near the kitchen with a kitchen knife in hand, not to fight, but to protect his son upstairs. Every creak, every gust of wind made him flinch. Then came the sirens. Blue and red lights cut through the darkness. Karen turned and ran, only to be met by 2 officers coming around the corner. She froze, crowbar in hand. This time, there were no excuses. The officers quickly cuffed Karen as she struggled to explain herself, but this time her words fell on deaf ears. Mark watched from the kitchen window, his chest tight with a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. After weeks of harassment, lies, and chaos, the nightmare was finally catching up with her. Karen was led away in handcuffs. The officers stayed to take Mark's statement, then conducted a thorough search of the property. What they found next shocked everyone. Hidden in the garage beneath a false floorboard was a small locked box. Inside were dozens of documents, fake HOA notices, forged signatures on board meeting minutes, and most damning of all, detailed notes outlining Karen's plans for a full takeover of the neighborhood homes, starting with Mark's. Among the papers was a thick folder labeled Kyle Whitaker in Karen's handwriting. It contained photos of Mark's son, surveillance logs, and scribbled threats written in the margins. Remove obstacle. Kid needs to be moved. Control the parent. Control the house. Mark's blood ran cold. This wasn't just an HOA dispute. It was personal. The officers called in a detective who pieced together Karen's history. The forced eviction of Tina Summers from her old neighborhood, the staged emergencies, the phony complaints designed to isolate families and gain control of their properties. Karen had built a chilling pattern of manipulation and control. But the twist came when the detective handed Mark a USB drive. On it was an encrypted video file marked for Mark Truth. Mark hesitated but played it. The video showed Karen's daughter, Clara, talking to a woman, her real mother, on the phone. "Mom, why does the man look sad?" "He's scared, honey, because your mom isn't who she says she is." The woman revealed that Karen had not been Clara's legal guardian. Clara had been placed temporarily with Karen through a social services loophole. The whole emergency accommodation, Karen claimed, was a cover for something darker. Her obsession with control and influence extended even into manipulating children's lives. The video ended with a message. "Mark, you need to know the truth. She's dangerous. Stay strong." Mark sat back, stunned. He wasn't just fighting a neighbor's selfishness. He'd uncovered a woman with a deeply twisted agenda, one that threatened not just his family, but the safety of the entire community. In the weeks that followed, the HOA board was completely restructured. Karen was charged with multiple counts of trespassing, fraud, and child endangerment. The neighborhood slowly began to heal. Kyle's room was restored to the way it should be, a safe sanctuary for a child. Mark often thought about how close they had come to losing everything. Not just a room, but their peace of mind, their home, and their family's safety. Sometimes, late at night, he would glance at the empty space on the wall where the crayon drawing had been taped and smile. Because the story wasn't just about fighting a Karen, it was about protecting what truly matters: home.